Aio ki te aorangi, aio ki te whenua, aio ki te ao katoa, aio ki a tātou. E te kaihanga tēnā koe, e Ranganui, e Papa Tuanuku, tēnā korua. E ngā mate, haere, haere, haere. E te honga ora, e te hau kāinga, te ati awa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora and a very good morning, one and all. And can I just firstly say how impressed I am to see all of you here, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, going through the notices of motion the morning after the conference social function, which I gathered happened last night. I heard there was a good band playing, so I hope it was a really fun night for everyone. Can I just start with a few acknowledgements to Benedict. Congratulations, as I understand it, on your re-election as President, to our National Secretaries and all of the senior leadership of the Union, to Hone Wetana as our kaumātua here for Congress. And I understand we have also had 2 life memberships awarded over the last couple of days. So to Janet Quigley and to Jenny Goodman. A life membership in any union is a mark of immense respect, and they are only ever awarded after many, many years of dedicated service and contribution to other workers and to the organisation. So both to Janet and Jenny, my hearty congratulations, very, very well deserved. Well, delegates, I'm really thrilled to be with you here today. I recall coming 2 years ago, which was only very shortly after the new government had been formed and I had come into my role. And, you know, as they say, a lot's happened in that time. And I want to start off with a simple thank you to all of you, but also a little bit of a cast forward. The thank you is for the incredible work that you have done in your workplaces and through your union over the past couple of years of dealing with the unprecedented situation of COVID-19, with all of the effects that that has had on yourselves, your whānau, your workmates, and of course the operations of the union. And critically, you have been there in the public service, keeping our country going. And I think this is something that we can just never lose sight of. I was sitting in the House only last night when we had the opposition pulling out their criticisms of growth in public service numbers as more bureaucrats, as we sometimes hear. And of course, Chris Hipkins was able to stand up and talk about the work that you and your colleagues had actually done to ensure that our country got through safe, that we kept people in work, that we kept critical public services going at the time of the biggest public health and economic crisis in the past 100 years. So from our government to you, we want to say a genuine thank you for everything that you have done over that period. And a thank you to the PSA as well for being a partner that we have been able to sit down with and work through some of the enormously complex issues that have arisen over that time. But we're also at a little bit of a juncture now. It's springtime and we are moving forward. We are going to need to continue to manage COVID. It is still with us and we need to take care of each other. But it is also a time to think about what comes next and the good things that we can do when we partner together. And there is so much for us to get on with. And when I think about some of the key issues that we need to partner with the PSA and all of your colleagues around across the broader public service, it's time to move on with our health sector reforms to ensure that we're delivering good and equitable health care to New Zealanders right around the country, that we finally move forward and remove some of those inequalities that have blighted the delivery of our health services for so long. It's time to move forward and make sure that all New Zealanders have access to decent and safe drinking water, no matter where they are in the country. It's time to move forward and build on the progress that we have made to ensure that every New Zealand child grows up not in poverty, but with opportunity and all of the basics in life that they need. We've reduced child poverty in New Zealand by 65,000 since we came into office during COVID-19. But any kid that grows up in poverty is one kid too many, and that is shared work that we have to get on with. And of course, we all face the immense challenge of climate change, the biggest social, economic, political and cultural crisis that humanity faces. And it is going to require all of us working together, government, public service, private sector, NGOs, local government, all of us needing to come together to make fundamental changes to the way that we do things if we want to hand on a world to our kids and our grandkids that is fit to live in. And so the ongoing partnership that we have with you is going to be critical across all of these areas. And now is the time to really hone in, I think, on some of those big challenges and opportunities. I consider our workplace relations system to be at the heart of unlocking many of those opportunities. We need to have a system that enables and encourages and sometimes pushes employers and employees in both the public sector and the private sector to come together. We need to ensure that workers have a genuine voice, are respected and listened to, and that at a sector level and a national level, we have genuine, meaningful, tripartite dialogue that moves us forward. And that has been key to our government's work, whether it has been getting through COVID-19 and dealing with those complex issues like workplace rights, like vaccination and all the rest of it. Whether it's moving forward with major new reforms like New Zealand income insurance, developed up in a genuine tripartite way, we want to move forward with that partnership approach. And for me, in the workplace relations and safety portfolio, the broader vision is a pretty simple one that I reduced down to 3 words. We want workplaces in New Zealand that are fair, that are safe, and that are productive. And the key thing about our vision for workplaces that are fair, safe and productive, that contrasts it with the other side of politics, is that we don't believe that those things are in conflict with one another. If you listen to the other lot, their lines consistently is that if you ever do anything that is good for workers, that makes the country less productive and leaves us worse off somehow. It's a zero-sum game according to them. Whereas our view is that if you invest in workers, if workers have a voice and have fairness and decency in the workplace, that is actually the high road to building the high-skill, high-wage, productive economy that we want. And most certainly, if we want to move forward and turn around New Zealand's shameful statistics for deaths and serious injuries and harm in the workplace, we need workers who are treated decently and who have a voice in their workplaces at sector level and a national level tripartite dialogue. And so that is the base and the vision around which we build our workplace relations and safety agenda as a government. At a level below that, there is a huge reform program that we have underway to make sure that we meet the ambitions of that agenda. And Kerry, thank you for your reflections on fair pay agreements. We are getting close now. It's late September, and my promise to you is that we will have fair pay agreement legislation passed into law by Labour Day of this year. And that And for me, as we picked up the opportunity of coming into office in 2020 with the ability to move forward with our agenda, is the single most important reform that we can and will make across the workplace relations and safety system. It is about fundamentally moving on from the race to the bottom structure of the labour market that we have had since the Employment Contracts Act came in 1991. It has been a model which has led to too many workers across both private, public and funded sector being stuck on unjustifiably low terms and conditions. And we have been reminded during the era of COVID about how important that work is. It is not that the work of our security guards or our cleaners or our call centre workers is not important. We couldn't have got by without them. It's simply that it has been undervalued under the workplace relations and bargaining system that we have had now in place for 30 years. It is not fair, it is not right, and it doesn't serve our country well. And that is what fair pay agreements will start giving us the ability to turn around. As Rachel Hunter once said, it won't happen overnight, but by ensuring that we do give workers the ability to be able to bargain at a sector level, we reduce the ability and the incentives for low-rider behaviour and the race to the bottom that has so pervaded many of those sectors. And as most of you will know, that model of sector-based bargaining is a common model across most parts of the developed world, and it is one that I think will deliver huge benefits here in New Zealand and deliver much more sustainable workplaces. But that's not all. We have a huge other agenda that we're moving forward with. One of the key areas that we'll be making further announcements on probably within the next couple of months, is where we go to with reform in the contractors space. Some of you might have seen some really distressing media stories recently about a guy from West Auckland called Jaden Smith. And this was the poor fellow who was electrocuted in a terrible scaffolding accident about 3 or 4 months ago. As a result of his injuries, he's lost parts of both his arms and legs. He fortunately survived. That was in doubt for some time. What compounded the tragedy of Jaden's workplace accident was the fact that he had been classified as a contractor by his employer at the time that he was carrying out that work. And that had a range of repercussions, including, at that time, his inability to access meaningful income replacement from ACC, because effectively if you're a contractor you're considered your own business, it works differently, and he was far, far worse off than he would have been if he had have been an employee. Now the local MP there, the Honourable Phil Twyford, went into bat for Jaden and we got that situation fixed. But it really pointed out this problem that we have, and an increasing problem across a range of sectors, where we have people who in reality are not operating their own businesses, do not have agency or control over what they are doing, but are being classified as contractors rather than employees, which often means that the employer is able to get off the hook for certain obligations that they would usually have as employers. And we see this playing out across a range of sectors where we have particular vulnerabilities with many of our workers, the courier driver sector, large parts of the cleaning sector, and so on. And so we've done a considerable amount of work, again on a tripartite basis, over the last year and a half to really crack down into that problem and work out what we can do to make a meaningful change. Both the CTU and Business New Zealand have presented to the government joint proposals to change the legal test for how we consider work to be classified as either employee or contractor work. We're refining those proposals and we'll be coming out with proposals in that area in the next couple of months. And I think this will be a real critical area for addressing some real vulnerabilities for vulnerable workers in our labour market as well. Another hugely important area of reform that is underway, and again we'll have further announcements before the end of this year, is in the area of modern slavery and worker exploitation in supply chains. I was presented in early 2021 with a huge petition which had been put together by the most unlikely of coalitions, which crossed unions, NGOs like Trade Aid and World Vision, church and faith groups, but also actually some of New Zealand's biggest corporates and employers, calling for New Zealand to take action on modern slavery. There's an estimate of 50 million people around the world who exist in conditions of modern slavery. When I talk about modern slavery, I really mean modern slavery. I mean people who are kept in chains, who are kept locked up, kids who are taken away and put to work, who are producing goods that we consume here in New Zealand now. And there have been estimates that in the average shopping basket that each of us consume each week, possibly around about $40 worth of our spend each week is produced with at least some input from modern slavery around the world. And that is not something that any of us could feel good about. And so there's an increasingly international movement to ensure that we have transparency across our supply chains, to ensure that we do not have modern slavery in those supply chains. Well, over the last year, we've worked with that coalition. We've set up a sector leadership advisory group chaired by Rob Fife with union representation, the Human Rights Commission, academia at the table, to develop up a world-leading framework for a modern slavery piece of legislation in New Zealand. And we will be confirming the details of that in the relatively near future. And I think it is something that we will feel proud of as a country in terms of us taking action on something that can only be described as an outrage and a crime. We have a huge amount of work that's also moving forward in the migrant exploitation space. And my colleague, the Honourable Priyanka Radhakrishnan, who's now the Associate Minister, will be moving forward with legislation before the end of this year, which will really start to take a much tougher line in terms of employers who have a consistent record of exploiting migrants and then who keep popping up again and seeking to re-employ in the migrant labour market. We need to send a very, very strong message that things are changing in this area. and that the period of time that we have been through, I would say between the late 1990s until relatively recently, where migrant exploitation was rife and where our immigration settings were almost facilitative of a model of low-cost, vulnerable, exploitative labour, those days are gone. Our government has set up a significant set of supports to ensure that doesn't happen anymore. A migrant exploitation visa to enable migrants to escape those situations and carry on in New Zealand. Giving greater powers to Immigration New Zealand and the Labour Inspectorate to work on investigations into migrant exploitation. The establishment of an 0800 number. A $50 million package to give our agencies the resources that they need to go in there and stop this happening within our country. And that piece of legislation will be the next step forward. And finally, I can talk about a couple of key reforms and changes that are happening in the health and safety space. The first is that we have a strong package of changes which will be rolling out over the next year in respect of our workplace health and safety regulations. Many of the regulations that we currently have in place go back to way before the Pike River tragedy and need to be updated and modernised to be fit for purpose to keep our workers safe right across our economy. We continue to have significant rates of harm. We continue to have that disproportionately in sectors like agriculture, forestry and construction, and we continue to have disproportionate harm occurring to Māori and Pasifika who are overrepresented in those sectors as well, and we have to make changes there. We will shortly be consulting on what we call our plant and structures regulations. Plant and structures is the sector of health and safety regulations where about 2/3 of the deaths and serious injuries occur. And so getting a modern and fit-for-purpose set of regulations in place there is going to be enormously important. And I'd also look forward before the end of the year to introducing legislation to ensure that workers in every workplace across New Zealand, no matter what the size, have the right to be able to elect and have health and safety representatives. When the National Party set up the Health and Safety at Work Act, they put a carve-out in place which meant that smaller workplaces below 20 workers are not able to require that they have health and safety representation through a rep or a committee. And our view very strongly is that no matter what the workplace, workers should have a voice in terms of making sure that they can be heard on critical health and safety issues. So we will be following through with that manifesto commitment before the end of the year. So as you can see, our current work programme and agenda is a large one, and we are moving forward with as much pace as we possibly can. As we begin to move through some of those key areas that are on the boil at the moment, that'll open up new space to other critical areas where we know that change and reform is needed. And two of the key ones that I will just highlight that I expect us to be moving into next year are further work around both pay transparency and also that set of issues around bullying and harassment across our workplaces as well. So look out for more progress there. My very final comment is to reflect that we're about 1 year away from the next general election. And everything that I've just talked about will be at stake at that election. Every single thing. And I'll just invite you, if you could stomach it, I don't recommend it, to listen to the way that the National Party and the ACT Party in Parliament talk about unions and the level of contempt and disdain for the idea that working people might organise together and might wish to have a voice in shaping our country and shaping their workplace conditions is absolutely appalling. And every single advance that we have made and will make will go backwards if there is a change of government next year, and then they'll take it back even further. And I'd say if you're wanting to think about what's at risk, don't think about going back to the key English government and what it was like for unions and working people then. Think about going back to the 1990s and a Jenny Shipley, Ruth Richardson style of government, because that is the level of right-wing ideology that will come into the cabinet and come into the government if there is a change of government, and you have David Seymour and other zealots, free market zealots, at the table. They despise unions and they despise you having any voice in the way that our country moves forward. And so there is critical work for us to do over the coming year to make sure that we do re-elect a progressive government that respects and gives a voice to working people and that respects and properly supports our public services. I know that it's not always easy, that we continue to have to work through some of the choices and ambitions that we have. But we will always be there in a respectful dialogue and relationship with you as a part of a broader Labour movement. And that all goes down the tubes if there's a change of government. So it's critical that we work together, that we're backing you and your aspirations, but we need your support as well to make sure that we return a progressive government next year and that we can move forward with that vision for fair, safe and productive workplaces for everyone. Once again, I thank you for your work over the past 2 years and look forward to all that we can do as we work together in the time ahead. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa, and I look forward to any questions you may have.